Well, hey everybody, this is Robert, and welcome to the last episode of Outbreak News TV for 2019. And since this is the end of the year, I want to do a look back at the 10 most important infectious disease stories of 2019. And this is all me. This is my choices, my decisions, based on a year's worth of looking at these outbreaks, these different news stories, different things that have been happening around the world. So, you may not agree. I would appreciate you commenting below if you think I missed something or it should be in a different type of order or whatever. I typically do these only in article format the past 5-6 years, but this year I'm going to go ahead and add a video version, and this is what you're checking out today. So let's go ahead and take a look at number 10. The Eastern Equine Encephalitis outbreak in the United States. Well, as you can see on the graph, in the past decade or so, we've averaged about 7 human EEE cases annually in the U.S. But in 2019, we saw a really robust year and quite a deadly year also. According to the CDC, there were 38 confirmed cases of human EEE disease, including 15 fatalities. Now, 10 different states reported human cases, and Massachusetts and Michigan were hit the hardest with 12 and 10 cases respectively. Interestingly, the state that reported the most human cases from 2009 to 2018, Florida, didn't report any human cases in 2019. So, what to expect in 2020? We don't know. Time is going to tell. One thing we do know is, and thanks to a wonderful article by Helen Branswell on Stat News, we're not going to know because EEE is a select agent, and a lot of these organisms are being destroyed because of because it is a select agent. So, we're probably going to be missing out on some really important research on why 2019 was such a big year for EEE. Number 9, the global malaria situation. Now, we don't have a complete picture of the malaria situation in 2019. However, earlier this month, the World Health Organization did release the World Malaria Report 2019. And out of it, we found some really good news and some not so good news. And the great news was for Southeast Asia, around the Mekong River Basin. 6 countries, and you can see them listed on the screen: Cambodia, China, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam, saw malaria cases drop by 76%, and deaths fell by 95% over the past decade. Really enormous progress in these countries with malaria. So that was really the great news coming out of the malaria report. In Africa, the news was not quite as good, and just from 2017 to 2018, we did see a 1 million case increase in malaria during that year. And the continent itself as a whole saw about 94% of all global cases and fatalities in 2018. So I suspect that things aren't going to be much different, right? Nigeria still reports 25% of all malaria cases on the planet. The Democratic Republic of the Congo still reports about 11 to 12% of all cases. On the website outbreaknewstoday.com, we see the country of Burundi that I've been covering all year, well over 8 million cases, and the population of the country is only about 12 million. So, yes, so malaria is still a major issue in Africa. And one thing that wasn't mentioned on my slide is in the Americas, malaria cases did go up also, and that was largely due to the country of Venezuela, who has seen astronomical numbers of malaria cases in that country. Number 8, I said Lassa fever, in Nigeria and West Africa. as the 8th most important story of the year. And of course, Lassa fever is still a major public health challenge in West Africa, and particularly Nigeria. Nigeria has been struggling with this virus for decades now. And just through the first 11 months of the year, Nigeria saw a little over 800 confirmed cases of Lassa and 166 fatalities, giving it around a case fatality rate somewhere in the ballpark of 20%. So that is pretty high. And Nigeria is not alone. Now, Liberia and Sierra Leone are two more countries that have experienced some outbreaks, albeit much smaller numbers than Nigeria. And then, of course, we had the case of the Dutch physician that was working in Sierra Leone who contracted Lassa and imported it to his home country of the Netherlands. So that was quite a stir not too long ago. So number 8 is Lassa fever in West Africa. Number 7, I called number 7 the general topic of vaccines, both good and bad. So vaccines were in the news a lot in 2019 for both, as I said, good and bad reasons. On the bad side, the anti-vaxxer movement really have their fingerprints on a lot of issues in 2019. Everything from the Orthodox Jews in New York City, the massive measles outbreak that was going on there. Robert F. Kennedy and his ilk, they were actively involved in Samoa just months before the outbreak started there in September, where well over 5,000 people contracted measles and more than 80 fatalities were reported on that little island. Now, on the positive side, it has to be the vaccine research that has been publicized during the course of the year. Of course, the Ebola vaccine got FDA approval just in recent days. And then there's a lot of promising research and work going on in the vaccine situation. The universal flu vaccine, they're looking at a Lassa fever vaccine, triple E, chikungunya, they're working on a Lyme disease vaccine, and that's just a small amount. There's a lot of good work going on in the field of vaccines, and I think that's a really positive thing, and that makes that contributes to vaccines being the number 7 most important infectious disease news story of 2019, in my opinion. Number 6, African swine fever in Asia. I really debated on whether this should be 5 or 6, but I put it at 6. And African swine fever was first reported in Asia, in China, in August of 2018. But 2019 came around and saw a vast expansion of the disease across the continent. And now I believe it's up to like 11 countries that have reported this disease of swine, not of humans, only of swine, to include the Koreas and Vietnam, the Philippines, Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, Timor-Leste, and most recently Indonesia just a couple of weeks ago. They've all reported outbreaks of this lethal virus in swine. And this has really resulted in millions of pigs being culled or actually died from the disease on the Asian continent. Yes, there is no direct infectious effect to human beings. However, the economic effect is going to be felt. It's been felt already, and it's going to be felt even more as these countries try to get this under control. And there's African swine fever has also been reported in quite a few places in Europe too. But as far as for my list, African swine fever in Asia is the number 6 most important infectious disease story of the year. Number 5, hepatitis A in the United States. This is something that made the list last year, right around the same ranking. And The first hepatitis A outbreaks began in 2016. I believe it was California and Michigan. But since then, the outbreak has grown to some 30 states and some 30,000 cases in 2019 total since 2016. There's been thousands and thousands of cases reported in 2019. And not only are there a lot of cases, but the hospitalization rate of these cases are really high. About 6 out of 10 of these 30,000 cases have required hospitalization. And somewhere in the ballpark of 300 fatalities have been reported since 2016. But like I said, 2019 was a very hard year for several states. And a lot of states were added to the list of 30 states in 2019. Kentucky leads the country, of course, with a cumulative total of about 5,000 since the outbreak started in 2017. But their numbers have really slowed, and now it's a trickle, just several cases on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. Some states, like Tennessee and Florida, saw a lot of hepatitis A cases in 2019. And in fact, right here in the state of Florida, the latest numbers show that there's been more than 3,300 hepatitis A cases in this state. And I believe that's the most in the country in 2019. So, the hepatitis A outbreak in the United States is number 5. Number 4, the polio resurgence. And in my opinion, this is arguably the most disappointing infectious disease story of 2019 after this unfortunate resurgence this year. And I think it was just last year or 2017 or 2018. I can't remember when I did the top 10. Polio, the possibility of polio eradication was in my top 10 because we were doing so well in that particular year. So in 2018, there were 33 total wild polio virus cases reported, and 12 of those were in Pakistan. The remaining were, of course, in Afghanistan. Now, official data from the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, as part of the UN, shows that there's been 125 total wild polio virus cases year to date, and over 100 of them are in Pakistan alone. And if you look at some of the media reports, now the GPEI is not going to give us an update till sometime after the new year. But Pakistani media reports have been coming out on a daily basis with more cases. And the latest one I saw as of the recording of this video was Pakistan is seeing about 119 wild poliovirus cases. So up from 12 in all of 2018. So very, very tragic. Very, very disheartening and disappointing to see this happening in that part of the world. But, in addition to the wild polioviruses, there's a number of circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus cases that have been reported throughout 2019, and the numbers have really risen as compared to 2018. According to the latest numbers from the GPEI, there's been 241 cases this year so far, spanning 16 African and Asian countries. And this compares to 104 in 2018. Some of the countries that have been hit extremely hard with circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus include Angola, which have seen at least 80 cases, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and some of the other African countries. In Asia, I think the Philippines has seen at least 10, maybe more cases to date. And a lot of these countries are seeing polio, Malaysia and the Philippines, for example, for the first time in at least 20 or more years. So it's very, very disheartening to know this is happening. Now, I just put this little comment from the World Health Organization here on the slide. The 23rd meeting of the Emergency Committee under the International Health Regulations regarding the international spread of poliovirus was convened by the Director General earlier this month. It was, I think, around December 20th or so. And it noted they were gravely concerned by the significant increase in wild poliovirus 1 cases globally, and said the rapid emergence of the circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus 2 strains in several countries is unprecedented and very concerning and not yet fully understood. So polio is going to be definitely on the radar for us at OutbreakNewsToday.com in 2020. Now, there was some good news. And if you have some good news, you got to let it out. And some of the good news was over the summer, Nigeria met the 3-year anniversary of having no wild poliovirus 1 cases in the country. Nigeria, of course, is one of the 3 endemic countries to date: Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nigeria. It's been more than 3 years since Nigeria has reported a wild poliovirus case. So if all goes well, they are on their way to elimination of wild poliovirus from the country. And the other good news was, in addition, wild poliovirus type 3 was declared eradicated this year in 2019. So my calculation tells me that there's 3 viruses that have been eliminated, essentially, right? We have smallpox eradicated, wild poliovirus 2, and now wild poliovirus type 3. So really, really good news there. While we're struggling with polio in much of Africa and the Middle East, well, not the Middle East, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Central Asia, right? And some Asian countries, East Asian countries, there was some very good news in the polio front. Number 3. Last year's number 1, the Ebola outbreak, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So, as I said, last year's number 1 story comes in at number 3 in 2019, and the 10th Ebola virus disease outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo since 1976 was declared on August 2018, and the outbreak continues through today, the end of 2019. And the latest numbers I had when I made the slide was 3,373 confirmed and probable cases, the second largest outbreak in history, behind the 2014 to 2016 West Africa outbreak, including 2,231 fatalities. Now, Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, said this week, while the number of there are positive signs that the number of cases is slowly reducing, the outbreak remains a serious public health concern, and it is unclear when it may end. And also in 2019, we got a scare over the summer when Uganda reported 3 people who tested positive for Ebola, the first cross-border cases since the outbreak began. And then, of course, later in August, there was an additional case. And one of the things that are hampering a lot of these health efforts in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is these areas are being hampered by armed groups and violence and these different marauders, and even sometimes even just the locals, for different reasons, are inhibiting health workers from taking care of these Ebola patients and other diseases, as you're going to see momentarily. But let's move on to number 2, the global dengue fever epidemic. And the numbers are truly staggering this year in many parts of the world. The one that sticks out the most, of course, is in Latin America, 3 million dengue cases, a new record, from Mexico, the Caribbean, and South. right? So we got Brazil that reported about 2 million cases all by itself, but Brazil was by far not alone, right? Mexico saw about 250,000, Honduras, Nicaragua, these countries all saw, over 100,000 dengue cases. Colombia, so it was a big issue in South America, Latin America, Central America, that area, and in some in the Caribbean also. Dominican Republic saw quite a few cases this year. If you went over to Asia, the Philippines reported more than 400,000 cases, which is about double what they saw last year. And in Southeast Asia, the Philippines is not alone. We've reported on the website, Malaysia saw a record year with over 130,000 cases. Thailand saw a lot of cases this year, and other countries. Singapore saw the most cases in 3 or 4 years this year. Then, of course, there was Bangladesh that saw well over 100,000 cases in 2019. And the first cases of dengue reported in Bangladesh were in 2000. And if you went from 2000 to 2018 and added up all the cases that were reported in Bangladesh, it doesn't even come close to the more than 100,000 cases reported in Bangladesh in 2019, including about half of them, over 50,000, reported in August alone. So it was a massive year for dengue fever in Bangladesh. In that same area of South Asia, we also see Sri Lanka having a higher year than normal. They're around 100,000 cases. And India, of course, is battling a lot of dengue also. And this is just a short list. There's stuff going on in Africa and a lot of other countries, and we haven't even touched on. But dengue fever globally is our number 2 most important infectious disease story of 2019. Drum roll, please. Number 1, global measles. So when I was looking at this list, I did debate between 1, 2, and 3. And I think these may have been the top 3 last year, but in a different order. But global measles won out for me in 2019 as the number 1 most important infectious disease story of the year. And again, we could just list the numbers, and the numbers are quite dramatic. More than 300,000, approximately 300,000 cases in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, more than 5,000 fatalities. That's more than double the Ebola fatalities caused by measles. So when you hear people say that measles is just a mild disease, well, no, not necessarily, right? Madagascar, going from late 2018, September 2018 through the end of the year, somewhere in the ballpark of 250,000 cases of measles, though that number has, their measles situation has been reduced dramatically in recent months. In Europe, Ukraine has seen about 60,000 cases this year. And since 2017, Ukraine has seen well over 100,000 cases. In Africa, Nigeria has reported somewhere in the ballpark of 55,000. And the Philippines has seen about 45,000 or so cases. And again, this is just a short list for the purpose of this video. But there's a lot more measles. Right here in the United States, about 1,300 measles cases were reported this year. This is the greatest number of cases reported in 27 years. And while we don't have the official global totals for measles in 2019, and it probably won't be released for some time, we do know in 2018 they saw more than 140,000 measles-related fatalities in 2018. So you can only imagine what we're going to see reported for 2019 sometime next year. So the numbers were just astounding for measles. And again, the issue with vaccination, whether it be an anti-vaccine movement, whether it be because people are unable to get to people that require vaccination for one reason or the other, whether it be violence in that area of the country or terrain or whatever it is, measles definitely seems like they really shot up in 2019 across the globe. And there you have it, right? This is the list that I've compiled after following infectious diseases and outbreaks very closely over the course of the year. And I encourage you to give me your comments. What do you think? Am I off base? Am I right on target or somewhere in between? I'd love to hear about it. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it with your friends. I want to hear what they have to say too. And I really appreciate you watching once again, and I'll see you after the new year on Outbreak News TV. Thanks a lot.